Well, this was definitely not on my bingo card for this month, but here it goes. The new and super popular Pokemon fan game PokéRogue has the lead developer quitting because of... Jesus? And then, users report her being banned from PokéRogue's official Discord server for defending trans rights and thereby indoctrinating 13-year-olds. What? Okay, this escalated super quickly and it is super confusing. I talked to a few people involved in this story and it's still tricky to put together exactly what went on a few weeks ago with PokéRogue. Let's take a step back and I will tell you everything I know. What the hell happened? Fan games have always been the backbone of the Pokemon community. Even though we have a new game almost every year, it's not enough. It's kind of like an addiction. I don't know, we are not well. So while the developers stay very conservative, experimenting a bit, and sticking mostly to a safe formula, the fans see every tiny little opportunity to go balls to the walls and create the wackiest fan games you can imagine. Pick your poison, we have something for every taste. Edgy, angsty, Linkin Park ROM hacks, difficulty Kaizo mods for you Nuzlockers, and wild randomizer runs that give PokeTubers a lifetime's worth of content to make. Pokemon is also an expensive game, especially in the global south, where getting a Nintendo Switch and official games could mean paying months of your hard-earned salary. So thank indie devs for super accessible browser games as well, like Pokemon Showdown, which has been breathing life and new players into competitive Pokemon for more than a decade now. All because Nintendo won't give us Pokemon Stadium free. But today I want to talk about another browser game, the celebrated newest addition to this long list of Pokemon fan games, PokéRogue. It's Pokemon and it's a roguelike. It's super fun. You choose 3 starter Pokemon and go building your team as you climb 200 floors of challenges, battle a queer-coded rival, fail to catch a legendary, and call bullshit when they throw a level 200 shiny Mega Rayquaza at you. Peak Pokemon. It's getting constant updates from its independent development team, which doesn't get any money to maintain this game, because doing that would mean an immediate visit from a Nintendo cease and desist letter. Lead developer Sam started the project, which currently has about 40 different people working on it, from developers to artists to various contributors. A passion project made from a dedicated team to the fans. And it's all over YouTube. It looks like all the PokeTubers are playing it and having a lot of fun. Challenge mode, classic mode. After learning how broken they made Raichu in this, I even beat the game myself, always landing a priority critical hits tab against anything in our way. But I know you're here for the drama, right? The tea? To understand what happened and how everything started. Well, first of all, I need to reinforce that I was not there. I'm not part of the Discord community, I am simply retelling what people have said and documented and told me. I spoke to queer members of the server and PokéRogue team members to try and clarify the story, and to put together a cohesive timeline of events. But at the end of the day, it's all declaratory. It's he said, they said. Please take everything with a grain of salt. Because if you still have some questions unanswered, it's super likely that they are unanswered for me as well. The main character here is Sam, who, until May 17, was the lead developer on PokéRogue. Our story starts when he announces he is quitting this passion project. He published this letter, which reads, among other things, that he is leaving the game effective immediately. He said that for 9 months he worked on the game alone as a solo developer, paying for assets out of pocket before it became a community project. He also mentioned feeling burnt out from so much work. But the oddest part of the declaration comes here. Quote, now, this is a complete tonal shift, but I want to be very transparent. The biggest reason I'm making this decision is because a project like this ultimately isn't compatible with my intended trajectory in life. As someone who naturally tends towards an unbalanced use of his time, I have found it impossible to be moderate in the amount of time I spend on something like this. As a hobby, it has become too important and consuming to me and has been hindering the things I value most, including my faith, my family, and my job. I am, first and foremost, a man seeking to follow God's path for me in life, and my short time alive in this world should be spent serving Jesus Christ rather than feeding my own ambitions. I suppose with this resignation I am giving back to the world what belonged to the world in the first place, so that I am not responsible if it changes in any ways that do not align with my personal values, rather than choosing to hold what is now a community project to my own personal standards, in an effort to preserve a clean conscience for myself. He then goes on to thank the rest of the team, says he doesn't plan on starting any new projects, and tell us all to read the Bible. Which I did, and that would actually make my mom very proud. Specifically the passages he mentioned. They all talk about rejecting what belongs to the world and embracing spirituality, to become an adult and leave behind the things of childhood. And I mean, you go, dude. Focus on what you think is important. Best of luck. But it was a little bit weirdly phrased, right? It's a weird thing to say during an abrupt announcement that you were leaving a project. Why did he choose to specify that he wanted to reject the modern world to embrace spirituality? Sounds funny to me. And it sounded funny to the Discord chat as well, because shortly after this announcement was made, the conversations and questions started to pop up. And before an hour had passed, the chat was on fire. They were discussing religion, people were being racist, and at some point somebody posted the message, trans rights, in the middle of the discussion, out of the blue, as you do. People started showing up, asking, why do trans people make everything about themselves? People started to defend trans rights, and then, you know, the most polite takes ever started to show up in that chat. And with these horrible messages showing, the only mod that was online at the time came to the rescue. And this moderator decided to ban and mute people who were defending trans rights from what I put together. I was told that the moderation team at this point basically took the stance of, stop talking about trans topics because people won't agree on it. But here's where things get really messy. Akuma, one of the contributors and wiki lead for PokéRogue, joins the chat and claims that Sam, the lead dev, actually believed that trans and queer folk were sinners. And he had the screenshots to back up a lot of things that Sam said. The screenshots are here, and also document members from the PokéRogue team using ableist slurs and defending Zionism in the server. The leaked messages from Sam are very religious, saying that being trans is against God's will and something that he disagrees strongly with. Sam also talks about how it's pretty clear from scripture what God intended for relationships and sexual relations. And well, this was the lead dev for PokéRogue. I have no idea if this is the case and I will speculate for the only time in this video, but it seems plausible to me that the person who first brought up trans rights might have known about his positioning, or assumed that a dev leaving for religious reason was a bit weird. Mostly in a time when a lot of queer people were joining the project. Maybe this first message was celebrating that a person with transphobic views would not be part of the team anymore. And after reading that he was concerned about changes being made without his consent, people started looking back at some decisions made in PokéRogue, and there are some weird stuff in there. There are no genderless Pokemon in PokéRogue, really. Pokemon like Gardevoir, which in the original games can be either male or female, in PokéRogue were forced to be female. Can't have a guy looking like that, am I right? Definitely against God's will. When I talked to Akuma about the screenshots, he told me that even though some of the people were initially banned, they were later reinstated and are still in positions of power within the community. But yeah, the way the moderation team dealt with the situation was less than stellar, to say the least. After kicking out of the server people who were standing up for trans rights, they still didn't manage to stop the racist and transphobic messages from coming through. They locked the server so no new messages could be sent. The mayhem moved, obviously, to Twitter, where a horde of disappointed players were trying to get answers on why they were getting muted for standing up for trans rights and accusing the moderation team of transphobia. A new community manager was appointed and released a statement saying that this server is a community based around the Pokémon fan game. There is no world where we should be discussing these hard-hitting topics with people who vary in age from 13 to 30 and beyond. Children could be exposed to these ideologies. And honestly, I think that think of the children is not that great of a take to make here, right? After the positioning of Sam was made public, calling the defense of human rights for trans people an ideology and think of the 13-year-old children reading this unsupervised on Discord was not a take the community was happy with. The "what about the children" statement was quickly taken down, and the team said that this person had not shown it to the rest of the team for approval. Then a new community manager was appointed, and the latest official pronouncement from the team has been of wholeheartedly defending trans rights, saying that they love people of all identities, religions, and genders. They are accepting of you, all to their dying breath. But I think the most interesting person to speak out after this was Momo, a transgender person who actually worked on the games themselves, as head artist. Momo released a statement recognizing that Sam's comments were transphobic and disheartening and frustrating. They also acknowledged that there are concerns about the moderation team being transphobic. They spoke to everyone involved and believed it was a misunderstanding. They said, "People were not trying to quell the discussion about transness in an attempt to obscure the comments that were leaked by Sam. It was rather just an understaffed moderation team trying to quell the tides of an incoming disaster." And personally, that looks plausible to me, because this was just mayhem. Mods being banned, and a community manager comes in and is switched hours later, a very disorganized and poorly intercommunicated moderation team with conflicting statements and decisions being taken. This looks like a team of volunteers with completely different ideas of what the best course of action was, bashing their head against each other. Momo went on to say that there were a lot of transphobic comments flooding through and overwhelming the moderation team. I assume Momo is arguing here that the moderation didn't want to mute trans supporters, they just wanted to kill the topic or the conversation altogether, because they didn't know how to deal with it. I mean, this is, after all, a Discord server with around 100,000 people. Momo pleaded for everyone just to sit down and have a normal dialogue, opening up the space for questions. They reinforced that there are lots of LGBT people involved in the PokéRogue project, and even though they don't speak for the team, there are active efforts to prevent bigotry in the PokéRogue community in the future. I tried to get in touch with Momo when writing the script to fact-check a few things and try to clarify a few questions, but unfortunately, they didn't reply to me. And that's all that happened so far. Although the Discord channel is now up and running and business as usual, when I started writing the script, it was still blocked, and they were running a shiny event on the game, not to distract anyone, the team said, but to say farewell to Sam. When going through the comments in the Discord chat then, most of the things I see are actually, "Why are we even discussing politics? I'm just here to play a fun Pokemon game." So, what now? This is super messy. I don't have any answers. I have opinions, just like anyone, but I don't think they would be that relevant for this video. I was never a part of the Discord channel, so I don't know what the mod team went through or what is happening inside the developers group chat. I don't know exactly what the moderators said to users defending trans rights. I'm just trying to document the story of transphobia, the story of bad decision making, and the story of fan communities. So, instead of decreeing who is guilty of what or accusing anybody of being a transphobe, except for Sam, those were pretty undeniably transphobic comments to me, I want to propose a thinking exercise with you, dear stranger online, about a couple of things. I recently watched a very good video by one of my favorite YouTubers, Thiago. I'm sorry, but that one is right now not available in English, but it's called Adventure Time and the Myth of the Solitary Genius. I'm going to summarize it a lot, but it's basically about how capitalism incentivizes us to idolize creators and authors as if it's just one person the sole responsible for the things we love. As if Greta Gerwig is the sole mastermind behind Barbie, or if Hideo Kojima is the genius that himself created all of his games. As if working tirelessly to create a fan game alone in your basement for 9 months turns you into a lonely genius who built everything with your bare hands, ignoring that you have other creative members, head artists, and multiple other people bringing different ideas and perspectives into projects and creations. As if a game like PokéRogue is the result of the work of one person, and not an amalgamation of various creative minds feeding into each other. Art is rarely created individually. It is beautiful because it's collective. And I can barely imagine how difficult it must be to manage a project of this size in your free time without making any money. Surprisingly, Nintendo was a little bit to blame here. Maintaining servers, getting artists, and having a coordinated and efficient moderation team without any financial support from the fans must be a Herculean task, and I think it is very important to recognize this effort from the PokéRogue team. That being said, there is also that old German saying, right? If there are 9 people on a table, an AFD supporter sits on it and nobody leaves, there are 10 AFD supporters on that table, or something like that. But what stuck with me, and I think it's the message that summarizes the feeling that a lot of players get out of this story, is I'm just here to play a fun Pokemon game. They don't want politics in their Pokemon games. When did Pokemon ever need to be political? When did video games ever need to be political? When did art ever need to be political? I started this YouTube channel because I really like YouTube. It is also part of a convoluted plot to force my friends to hear me speaking about a very niche interest of mine for 25 minutes. But yes, I watch it a lot. And in the next section, I will do to you what I usually do to my friends. Tell them about a few videos I saw. Some of these videos will only be available in foreign languages, so I think it's kind of nice to be able to adapt some of that content to English as well. I will be highlighting my sources for each section over here on top somewhere. But make sure to check them all out afterwards. There will be links to everything in the description. It is super interesting about this little YouTube journey of mine, how you go building up a visual language after a while. I have 10 other videos, and it's already the second time that I have brought you, dear stranger online, to my cozy corner. This is where I go to get more intimate, also visually signifying a deeper dive into the subject, compared to the more well-lit, more descriptive, up-close webcam frame we had so far. It's also important for longer videos that I switch things up a bit to spice it up, grab your attention once again, and make sure that my retention graph is pretty enough for the YouTube algorithm. And for me as well, of course. I like it when you are paying attention. And I am very well aware there is nothing groundbreaking or even original about who I am or what I'm doing. The moment you come out as trans, there is a 15% chance you will eventually post a clever essay online at some point. And I might not have Natalie's fancy costumes or Abigail's super professional sets, but you know what I do have? Christmas lights, a dream, and 3 semesters of cinema classes under Claudinha Mesquita. And she's the sweetest. She showed me some very nice documentaries. What was I talking about again? Oh yes, politics and video games. That's so boring, right? Politics sucks. I wish I could turn off my brain for 5 minutes and just focus on enjoying my games. Or just enjoying my life? That's the boring thing about being trans, I tell you. When your body is politicized, it becomes tricky to run away from politics. Every trip to the bathroom becomes political, going through security checks in the airport becomes political, going to the gym becomes political. Trust me, I know how annoying having politics everywhere can be. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to just ignore it? And the worst thing about it, it shapes who you are as a person. Politics seems like this ever-looming shadow you can't escape from. Day after day of self-fulfilling prophecies. I was born in a very young democracy. Just a decade before I was born, everyone around me was living in a brutal military dictatorship. People went missing and never showed up. Mothers were tortured in front of their daughters. Thanks a lot for that, CIA! And even though I wasn't born yet, it completely shaped my worldviews, what teachers talked to me at school, what I saw on TV. I was a kid who was given the privilege of growing up in a democracy, and there were some very big expectations put on top of me because of that. It was completely different than what my parents experienced when growing up. All of those abstract concepts of how macro politics works are what shaped my view of the world. And to this day, they are still here. I was shaped by having the first woman president of my country deposed in 2016. I was shaped by coming out as transgender in 2018. All of those events, regardless of how personal or impersonal they are intrinsically interconnected and are decisive in saying who I am, in telling the story of me. And those politics are visible in everything I do, including this channel. Whether I'm doing a video about fun outfits or about a silly mushroom Pokemon. Okay, but then for me to say that a children's game of cute monsters is intrinsically political as well? That's going a bit too far, right? Even a bit ridiculous. How can there be politics in something so simple and straightforward as that? It is designed for mindless fun and mindless fun only. Pokemon exists in a hermetical bubble, isolated from any kind of politics, you might think. But I would argue that even though some games might sound simple, they are inevitably always made by very, very complex people. Art is intrinsically linked to the worldviews of the people who create it, and people are products of politics of their times. When you think, for example, about Pokémon directors like Satoshi Tajiri, Ken Sugimori, or Junichi Masuda, you probably think about bug catching, beautiful watercolor artwork that needs to come back, or about forcibly breeding an immigrant amorphous blob with monsters of optimal values and rare colors in a brutal genetics optimization endeavor, discarding any undesirable outcome. Sorry, I meant breeding for shinies. But people like Sugimori and Masuda are more than anything people. People who grew up in Japan in the 60s and understood who they were as people in that moment in time. If only I could find out if there was anything of political importance going around in Japan around mid of last century that might have shaped those people's lives forever.
The second bomb was intended for the city of Kokura, but it was too cloudy, so the plane moved on to Nagasaki.
There is no horror like atomic horror. It shakes me to my core. It is horror that makes you wish you were dead. It is horror that persists longer than death, for decades, centuries, lifetimes, and half-lives. It is hereditary horror, and there is no way to look away. Growing up in the 60s in Japan, seeing children being born in the house next to yours with atomic horror still ingrained into their DNAs, with the United States, which vaporized 2 of your cities, still conducting nuclear tests in your backyard, occupying your government, and censoring what could or could not be produced. Bombs getting larger and more devastating, and even decades after the war is over, still killing Japanese civilians with atomic horror. That's not something you can just let go. It shapes who you are. Like radioactivity, it's there in everything you do. Ken Sugimori was a lonely kid growing up. He was one of those kids who moved cities a lot, you know the story. One of the cities he lived in as a small boy was this coastal city in the south of Japan called Nagasaki. Imagine a nerdy, introverted kid who loves to draw manga and watch Ultraman growing up in Nagasaki, a city forever doomed to carry atomic horror in every single corner, every city park, in the face of every adult you see, every teacher that teaches you. Can you even imagine what the atmosphere around was? What the sense of identity, national and individual, was for this kid? Well, I sure can't. Thankfully, we have art for that. Sugimori really loved kaijus growing up. Most of the crew working at Game Freak back then did. In an interview, Sugimori said that, "Initially, we talked about a game where you make kaiju fight each other. Alright, I said. I'll try drawing some kaiju then." Gundam, Ultraman, Godzilla, those were big influences in creating the Kawaii Kaiju look of Pokémon. In an interview to Time magazine, Satoshi Tajiri, often credited as the creator of Pokémon, said, "I'm part of the first generation who grew up with manga and anime, you know, after Godzilla. I was absorbed with Ultraman on TV and in manga. That's what Pokémon is. Playing video games, watching TV, Ultraman with his capsule monsters. They all became ingredients for the game." You know where I'm going with this, right? The first kaiju ever put to film was Godzilla in 1954. You know him, the king of monsters? This huge, radioactive, unstoppable force that terrorizes the people of Japan and can set fire to entire cities. The first 1954 film is less than a decade older than the bombing of Nagasaki, and it came as a response to a time when the United States was still testing larger and larger bombs in the Bikini Atoll, very close to Japanese waters, and unknowingly victimized the crew of Japanese fishermen. Godzilla is a political manifesto. Godzilla is a film that processes the trauma of an entire country.
Godzilla may seem like just an oversized lizard, but there was a lot of thought and care put into his design. If you look here, you'll see that Godzilla doesn't have scales like a normal reptile would. That grooved hide was meant to evoke the keloid scarring of the survivors of the nuclear blast. And the blast itself was represented in Godzilla's mushroom cloud-shaped head. Gojira was about perspective, building a window into the post-war fears and anxieties of the ordinary people involved in these tragedies. And
no matter how much you hygienize it, whitewash it, and throw the billionaire Hollywood machine on top of it, kaijus are essentially and intrinsically, at their genesis, atomic horror. And you know what this means for this video is... Oh, Wait, sorry. I know I was cooking, but let me interrupt this just for a second. Oh my god, guys! Shiny Sprigatito, let's go! Such a beautiful shiny. Oh my god, how much I love this Masuda method thing. And speaking of it, Junichi Masuda was born in Yokohama, the south of Japan as well, 2 years before Ken Sugimori. He was a kid with a very strong connection to nature. In his personal blog, he recalls going every summer back to where his parents were born, the city of Fukuoka on Kyushu Island. There is no place like Kyushu, he writes. The Hoenn region in Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald is modeled after Kyushu because I wanted to recatch my memories of summer in Kyushu. We designed the region with the importance of human relationships and the warm heart of the Kyushu people in mind. Okay, Kyushu, I'll visit there again. Of course, on the way, I will play Pokemon Emerald. Ruby and Sapphire were the first Pokemon games that Masuda directed, and even if you think that they might have too much water, the nostalgia, childlike wonder, and empathy for people and Pokemon bleed through every detail of Hoenn, directly mirroring Masuda's love for Kyushu and Fukuoka. He describes his summers in Fukuoka as living in a nature paradise that he would explore and uncover mysteries about, catching crabs, fishes, beetles, adventuring through forests and rivers. It was a dear place to young Junichi Masuda. The district of Fukuoka is also well known for its rich history and as the site of an ancient castle town, Kokura. If you are paying attention here, you will notice that this is the second time we have mentioned Kokura in this video.
The second bomb was intended for the city of Kokura, but it was too cloudy, so the plane moved on to Nagasaki.
Whenever you manage to avoid a dangerous situation, even without knowing you are at any risk, Japanese people will say you have the luck of Kokura. The original target for the Nagasaki bomb was Kokura, a small place in Fukuoka, a 30-minute drive from where Masuda's parents were born. The US changed targets last minute because of poor weather. Those crabs and fish, those forests, those warm-hearted people, those memories that Masuda knows and loves, the places that are a direct inspiration for the Hoenn region were supposed to be vaporized by atomic horror. And they were saved. Saved by the weather. Let that sink in for a second. The thematic fit, the weather trio, Rayquaza protecting the Hoenn skies against the end of the world. Is it on purpose? How the hell would I know? But in the game he directed, in the game that Masuda paid homage to Fukuoka, the place he loved so dearly, the place that in 1945 was saved by nature, saved by the sky. Politics shapes us, and it shows in everything we do. Do you know something that is also funny about that game? The Regis. They are creepy and weird, and look a little bit out of place. How you encounter them is extremely convoluted and specific. And there is this fan theory that is super popular in Japan but not really well known outside of it. I guess that it's because of the close relationship with Japanese geography and very specific places that we don't know that well. But the crazy thing is that Hoenn, having been modeled after Kyushu, there are some weird correlations between the places where you find the Regis in the games and their real lives correspondent. You find Registeel and Regirock where Miyazaki and Noita are supposed to be, two cities that were heavily bombarded in World War II. Regis would be found in Nagasaki itself. Even more crazy is in Diamond and Pearl, you find Regigigas in Snow Point Temple. Its location corresponds exactly to the Monument of Peace in the city of Wakanai. It is a monument that reads, "We must not repeat war once more." There are other funny coincidences such as the need to have Wailord and Relicanth in your party to summon the Regis, which, some fans say, could be referencing Fat Man and Little Boy. The Regis also have a very interesting moveset. In Ruby and Sapphire, and randomizer Nuzlockers will know this pretty well by the way, the only move they learned at level 1 is Explosion, being the only Pokemon in that point to do so. They all learn Ancient Power, in Japanese called Genshi no Shikara. It is written differently, but pronounced exactly the same way as the word Genshi no Shikara, which translates to Nuclear Power. They also learned Hyper Beam, which in Japanese is called Destruction Beam, on level 89. Go Google what happened on the 8th of September 1945. And this would not be the only time that Game Freak recognized that date on a game. If you play Diamond and Pearl on September 8th, you will be 10% less likely to find any Pokémon. Spawn rates are lowered in respect of Nagasaki. But that is just a theory, a game theory, wacky fan theory, and I've been on the internet long enough to learn not to take those too seriously. There are a lot of other things backing this one up, and I incentivize you to look for more if you are interested, because it is actually interesting, but not really something that I want to cover in detail here. Okay, what am I trying to say here? That Pokemon is actually political because everyone born in Japan was traumatized by atomic horror, and thereby every single piece of media coming from Japan in the past 50 years is inherently political? And the Regis could be referencing nuclear war in a children's game, so politics. Really, that's my hot take. It kind of is, a little bit. As I told you before, Pokemon are basically Kawaii Kaijus, with Kaiju basically translating to strange creature. I would argue that the concept of Pokemon wouldn't exist without Kaiju media, which fundamentally explores the traumas of war and the pain politics can inflict on people. These game designers and the stories they are telling us are intrinsically linked to places with a humongous political and historical background, and that cannot ever be separated. It's undeniable that Godzilla, as a manifesto against the use of nuclear arsenal by the United States, is directly linked to the Ultraman cartoons Sugimori watched as a kid, which are directly linked to him drawing Rhydon. But there is something else I didn't talk about, the other part of the phrase, the kawaii of it all. If the kaiju part of Pokemon speaks directly to the background and childhood of its creators in the 60s, the kawaii aspect of Pokemon is all about Japanese diplomatic policies in the 90s, while the game was developed. Can you guess what it is? Well, it's good old neoliberalism! I would have put the song Hello Kitty by Avril Lavigne here, but this is literally my first video after monetizing the channel and I am extremely scared of copyright flag. Just imagine it, please. Did you know that the kawaii movement started out as a countercultural feminist protest against the neoliberal salaryman right-wing Japanese ideology? Young Japanese students and teenage girls were using these cute, round letters and doodles to write in a way that old people could not read, in a style called marumoji. Really. They were hiding secret messages underneath cuteness. It was kind of a code for ciphered messages to schedule protests, rebel against the strict social roles of expecting them to be nothing but a stay-at-home mom, and deny taking part in the dehumanized, ultra-liberal project of a hard-tech Japanese society, booming in the 70s. A stand against the work-centered ideal that sold Japan as a neoliberal utopia in the post-war. Cool, right? I didn't know about this either until a few weeks ago when I watched this amazingly well-researched video by Brazilian YouTuber Normose. If you are a Portuguese speaker, I highly recommend you check the video out in the description. If you aren't, I will try to summarize what is important for us right now to the best of my capabilities. The thing is that this countercultural kawaii movement was just like punk rock, the internet, South American football, and everything that I love, ruined by capitalism. The Japanese government realized that the best way to fight against this movement was to steal its aesthetics, dress it down of any revolutionary undertone, and repackage it as a product of national branding and individual personality traits. Japan saw the opportunity to steal the kawaii movement's aesthetics and turn it into something you could purchase and consume. I was in a store that sold Japanese products last week, looking for a used Pokemon Emerald cartridge, and it is insane how everything they sold there is extremely kawaii. You would see millions of Hello Kitties and Kuromis stamped in candy, in cookies, in olive oil, in snacks, in soda, and it's difficult to resist, because it's so cute. I drank a delicious Pikachu lemonade just because it had Pikachu in it. Yes, I'm that easy. Kawaii became so popular worldwide that it became completely ingrained in the collective consciousness of how we, outsiders, view Japan. When we think about Japan, we don't think about a military force that expanded its imperialist influence over East Asia in the last few centuries. We don't think of a country where the working class is completely drained, overworked, lonely, and explored. Of course not. Japan is cute, Japan is kawaii. Everything we consume from Japan is soft, innocent, and inoffensive. To quote Normose's video again, kawaii is used to soften society and power dynamics, and present authority without any threat. In a chapter of his book called Kawaii Diplomacy, Daniel White, a cultural anthropologist studying in Japan, talks about how ingrained in Japanese institutions this strategy is, to the point where Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has appointed official diplomatic ambassadors for new trend communicators of Japanese pop culture, commonly known as ambassadors of Kawaii. A subservient and cute Japan is part of the American dream design, and also the result of a country being so utterly defeated in a war that it became basically a minion of United States foreign policy. Talking about Hello Kitty, Normose also shared this incredible quote from writer Angela Choi, which I will paraphrase here, saying that Hello Kitty doesn't have claws, doesn't have fangs, and doesn't have a voice. Hello Kitty doesn't speak Japanese, she doesn't speak at all. She's the image of everything the United States ever dreamed of for Japan. Crazy, right? And Pokémon, being a product of this extremely political kaiju iconography being squeezed inside the Japanese kawaii propaganda machine, ensured that Pikachu would turn into one of the most recognizable faces in history, and that Pokémon would be the most profitable media franchise in the world. When talking about the designs of the first 151 Pokémon, Ken Sugimori, again, said, "I came up with Clefairy, but it's just one cute creature, and I was never really able to branch out from that. There's a limit to the number of tough-looking Pokémon one can make. So we made weird Pokémon, huge Pokémon, mechanical Pokémon, and after considering all these variations I thought, we need more cute ones. There weren't many designers in the company at the time, and I was doing most of it. And since I was designing from the perspective of men, I asked some of our female staff, like Nishida, to join. It's actually super funny if you think about it. Ken had troubles to make Pokémon actually kawaii, so he had to call a girl to help him. Like, think about that for a second. If Game Freak didn't have a female designer on board, we wouldn't have Dratini, Squirtle, Bulbasaur, Charizard, or Pikachu. Imagine a Pokédex without those. Pokémon might have flopped hard. But no, diversity isn't important. Different points of view, who needs that? Why do we have to have women everywhere these days? Don't put woke politics into my games. Atsuko Nishida also designed Sylveon, so she's literally a trans ally and mother. I love her. Well, dear stranger online, this was a long trip and I really hope I didn't lose you along the way. This is the longest, riskiest, and most complex script I ever wrote. I hope I was able to keep your attention, but most of all, I hope you really understood what I wanted to say here. We talked about why Japan loves monsters and how difficult it is to not be influenced by politics around you, mostly when those politics are terrifying and hurt you everywhere you look. We talked about how the sky saved Hoenn and about crazy conspiracy theories involving the Reggies. We talked about how Pokémon is a product of politics that span multiple decades, and I swear, we didn't even scratch the surface of these Kawaii Kaijus. All that not to mention that there are various discussions around gender and transgender themes, both in the Pokémon games and in the anime. And we will talk about that in my next video, stay tuned. But after all that, how can you even say that when I complain about bigotry in a fan community, I'm forcing politics into your games? Honey, the politics were always there. But most importantly, that is a good thing actually. Politics makes video games better. It gives them meaning. It helps us relate and connect to them and to the people who create them, to their lives and their stories. Politics means that we care about others and we care about building a society that is worth living in. When things lack politics, they lack meaning. They are just boring. Let me give you an example. Bumble. It's a dating app. And in your profile, you can add your political inclination. If I'm swiping and I see someone who is right-wing, I will, of course, roll my eyes. However, when I see someone that ticks the box, I don't like politics, I swipe left immediately. Because, first of all, how privileged do you have to be not to like politics? To state out loud that politics doesn't affect you in the slightest and you have the opportunity to just ignore it? As I mentioned earlier, being an immigrant and a trans woman means that everything that I do, everywhere I go, all of that becomes a political matter. My body and my existence are made political by others. I don't have the option to not care about politics. What would I talk about on a date with a person who doesn't care about that? Not liking politics is, in itself, a political position. And art without politics is just decoration. Video games without politics are hollow. Hell, even Tetris is political. Go watch the movie. It reminds me of a tweet I saw, and I will paraphrase, saying that AI art made me believe in the human soul, because it showed me what art looks like without it. Lack of politics is the same. Yes, politics is everywhere. Yes, there are politics in your Pokemon roguelike fan game. And no, I will not stop talking about it. Because politics actually makes it so much better. I wrote the first part of the script like 2 days after the whole PokéRogue drama happened. I just had a very successful trans Pokemon video, which you probably watched. And I'm still extremely thankful to everyone who helped in sharing it, really. Among Us skyrocketed my channel to almost 10 times its size and gave me a much bigger audience now. This made me want to follow up with something as big as, and the roguelike transphobia drama sounded like the perfect storm, tailor-made for me to cover. I wanted to create something quick to surf on the engagement wave and farm a lot of curious views in the heat of the moment to really get my brand new channel out there. I think the whole thing happened on a Friday or a Saturday, and I had the first part of the script ready to be filmed on Monday. Strategically, from a digital marketing perspective, that would be, sorry for the pun, super effective. But I really felt I was just like writing gossip. And it's not like shit-talking the billionaire transphobe author like in previous videos of mine. I had the impression I would just be me antagonizing very regular people who didn't have any kind of platform really, and were just trying to do their best in a job they weren't even being paid for. But the key politics out thing kept hammering against my head. And honestly, I was wrong. A Discord server with 100,000 users is a huge platform. Many times larger than the one I have. And when you are dealing with so many people, I don't think any amount of amateurism should be an excuse for this story to go unregistered. And after 2 weeks, there is still only one other video on YouTube talking about the situation. And it's super short. So I thought I really needed to speak out on this. Because in the end, the way we manage our communities, no matter how official, large or small, it is, surprise surprise, politics as well. And if we don't document, we don't learn. And if we don't learn, we can't do better. This video must be super long already, and I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching it this far. I started this channel a few months ago and I really didn't think I would get this excited and invested in it. It fills my heart with joy to be able to have these longer conversations with you. To finish things up, there is just one nice thing I found when doing research and I wanted to share. It's this quote by Junichi Masuda, and I think it talks a lot about who he is, what he values when developing a game, the kind of things he thinks about when doing that, and, well, his politics. Junichi said, Pokémon Fire Red and Leaf Green will go on sale on September 9 in North America. If we follow the naming scheme of the original series, the new games should be Fire Red and Water Blue. But I wanted to use green for the following reasons. 1. A leaf is a symbol of peace. 2. Fire and water are opposing concepts, so it seems like a conflict. On the jacket, we wanted to have a colorful drawing of Bulbasaur. 3. A leaf may not be immediately familiar to Japanese kids, but for kids overseas, it's an easy concept to grasp. In this world of conflicts, we wanted to give a name that is suggestive of a peaceful world. This is the part of the video where I'd say like and subscribe, but more than anything, what I want to say is be civil in the comment section, okay? We are all real-life people on all sides of the screen. We can have nice, polite conversations. Instead, go watch my Nuzlocke and tag Pokemon challenges to do a reaction to it. I think that would be super fun. I'm learning still how to be a content creator, so I think I should do more of those. And more live streams. They are coming soon, and I hope I see you there when they do.